Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us at World City and for this panel discussion called The Show Must Go On. My name is GABRIEL STELIAN-SHANKS. My pronouns are he, him, plus. And I am coming to you on a brisk autumn day from New York City. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we have three extraordinary artists and arts leaders who I am honored to be in community with today. I'm going to begin by asking them to introduce themselves. So let me first welcome, let's see, in alphabetical order, Elaine Bedell. Welcome, Elaine.
Hello, thank you for inviting us. And well, it's good afternoon in London, which is where I'm speaking from. Quite a bright autumnal, but very cold November day in London. I'm the CEO of South Bank Centre, which is the UK's largest art centre. We have a contemporary art gallery, the Hayward Gallery. We have 3 concert halls, which deliver both contemporary music, dance, all sorts of performance and classical music. And we have a lot of civic space, which we also use for cultural experiences, but which people just come to be in, to live in, to socialize, to think, to work. Or just because they haven't got anywhere else to go. We're 11 acres right in the centre of London along the banks of the River Thames.
Thank you so much, Elaine. Great to have you here. Next up, it's my honor to introduce Cheryl Collar. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, Gabriel. Thanks for having me. My name's Cheryl Collar. I identify as she, her, hers. I reside in New York City. I am currently in my home in Pennsylvania on originally Muncie Lenape land. And I am a freelance theater director who dabbles in television here and there. I've worked on Broadway, off-Broadway, in the regions. When I'm really lucky, Elaine, I get to work in London here and there. And I'm just thrilled to be here with these wonderful people.
Thank you, Cheryl. And last but certainly not least, it is my pleasure to welcome Yemi Sonuga. Hello, Yemi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yemi Sonuga. I am an artist, a writer. I am currently in Toronto on Treaty 13 land, and we are all settlers on this land. I have performed all over the world. I used to live in London as well. I know the South Bank Centre very well. It's a beautiful place. Congratulations. I've been on the West End on Broadway tours. I'm on a Broadway album. I'm currently about to open the Toronto cast of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. And I'm so excited to be here, not only with these brilliant people on this panel, but everybody who is watching today and beyond. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Yemi. And to you all, I am GABRIEL STELIAN-SHANKS. I'm a director, writer, and producer. I am the artistic director of the Drama League of New York, which is one of the United States' oldest arts service organizations, and its only full-time creative home for stage and film directors. I'm also the co-founder of A Certain Something, which is a production company producing film, television, theater, music, spoken word, and online content that focuses on intersectional identities, especially in a global framework. Welcome, Elaine, Cheryl, and Yemi. I'm so excited to be with you today for this discussion of theater in a global framework, which the powers that be at World City have titled The Show Must Go On. And as I began to prepare for this panel, that title's irony struck me because, of course, for most theaters across the world during the pandemic, the show didn't go on. Stages closed their doors, theater and productions were canceled and postponed, and millions of artists around the world lost their jobs and suffered health consequences. We are now on our way back from that process, and it's interesting to be in conversation about that in this moment. The show must go on is an old trope in our business, of course. It means that nothing matters but the performance, and that everyone involved subjugates themselves to making it happen. Cheryl, I'm going to come to you first. So in a world where the shows by and large didn't go on, what does it mean to you to have the show go on now? What are you wrestling with and seeing as your productions around the country return to the live schedule?
What a great question. I feel like we stand a chance at more humanity in our field. And we're standing a chance, not only post-pandemic, but post-George Floyd's murder and the oppression that exists everywhere for our global majority citizens, that we are placing as much importance on mental health in the workplace, in a safe work environment, in an equitable work environment. And I'm feeling that the projects that I'm working on and the producers that I'm working with, because I primarily work in commercial theater, are providing us with the tools to do that. And that feels like it's going to make the art better, because we'll be able to collaborate in a way that feels open and honest and authentic. And then specifically to me, I'm 61 years old. I have 2 children. I am a woman in a field that is not dominated by women, and particularly 25 years ago when I came into this business, because I started a little late, I had to lie about having children. I had to lie about, when my kid had a dance recital, or I had to go to a parent-teacher conference. So I also feel that for women and women with children and the equity that that's going to hopefully bring, I'm hoping and I'm feeling quite cautiously optimistic that it's going to create art that is going to transcend what it never transcended before. And also, I think when you don't just basically, when you theater is a collaborative art form, it requires an audience. No matter how you try to zoom it, no matter how you try to film it, you need that audience. And so, I'm hoping that that will be appreciated and celebrated a little bit more than it ever has been before.
I'm struck a little bit, Cheryl, by what you're talking about in terms of production, collaboration, and relationship to audience, and all of these things happening in a structural underpinning that we're really taking apart and looking at in this moment. And these productions happen inside structures, whether that's a commercial production or inside institutions. And so it makes me want to come to you, Elaine, next. As the leader of the South Lake Center, you were called upon to make some very tough choices during this time. You had a number of layoffs and have replaced those positions as you come back to your public performances. I'm curious about what this, in this time, has surprised you, or perhaps that those listening to us today may not know about what it took for an arts institution like South Bank to make it to this point in the pandemic.
Yes, thank you. Look, the lockdown, as we called it in the UK, was horrible. I mean, it was stressful for everybody who worked at South Bank Centre, no matter whether you were on furlough, whether you were in the senior team and working flat out to try and save the organisation, because genuinely that's what it came down to. We were very close to insolvency. We're only partially publicly funded, we're 57% publicly funded. The rest is commercial income that we are totally dependent on. And we derive that from our restaurants and bars and obviously our ticket sales. And of course, all of that came to a halt at exactly the same moment last March. So it was traumatic, genuinely traumatic. I think, and as you say, we had to restructure, and sadly, we had to say goodbye to some members of staff. We are busy rehiring, even as I speak, and I'm very glad to say we had a re-engagement program with our unions, and a lot of those staff have joined us. And actually, some of them have joined us in completely different roles. They've decided to do something a bit different, but still at South Bank Centre, and that's been incredibly rewarding that we've been able to see people develop their skills. I think the challenges for us are, we kept saying to ourselves, when we get out of this, we're going to do things differently. And the challenge for us is to continue to feel that. Now we're fully back open, we're welcoming audiences back. It's to maintain that. It's to still try and mix things up a bit and do things differently. One of the big relations for us was digital. I mean, we're a very, very site-based organization. We depend on the live experience. Our whole business plan is about selling tickets for a live experience, whether that's theatre, dance, music. We want people to come to South Bank Centre. When we were shut down and people weren't able to come, we streamed a lot of our events from behind closed doors. And we got reasonable audiences for that, and our reach was fantastic. We got far more good audiences for that than we've been used to. But the challenge for us now is to work out how do we exist in a hybrid world where we can have both the live experience and a digital accompaniment to that without that cannibalizing the audiences. What does that mean for a modern art centre, which is very dependent on a site that needs to be vital and needs investment? But equally, how can we retain those audiences we discovered during the pandemic globally through our digital offer? And how can we expand that digital offer? And we've got some very exciting ideas about how to do that, but it requires investment. It's not an easy way to make a profit, digital. It's a very big chasm into which you pour lots of money before much of it starts returning. And so we've got to work out how we're going to fund that and how we're going to do it. But and I think that means new partnerships and different kinds of partnerships, and probably the sorts of partnerships pre-pandemic we weren't contemplating ever having. And that bit is genuinely exciting.
It is really exciting, and it strikes me, Elaine, how much of what you're wrestling with in the UK mirrors our experience here in New York of figuring out new ways to engage an audience that is, I think, perhaps naturally hesitant to return to live space and to figure out how to engage in live performance, which requires a performer and an audience to exist. And of course, that makes me want to turn to Yemi, who is, I don't know, is it ridiculous to think of you as a frontline worker for the arts, as an actor in this space, as someone who encounters those audiences who are returning? I'm wondering what the return to live performance has been for you, and what are you noticing both on stage and off stage about the theater world's return?
So here in Toronto, we did a lot of live performances in the summer outside in Hyde Park, and you guys have Regent's Park and you have Central Park where the Shakespeare is done. So for me, I've worked at Regent's Park before, and the welcoming of an audience back was absolutely thrilling and wonderful, and just quite exciting, really, to be able to share that magic and then receive it back. Because I do agree with Cheryl that live theater does need an audience, but it's a partnership. It's not just an audience consuming. They give so much back. They influence how the show actually takes its route for the night. The energies are exchanged and the production is made complete. One thing that I do think is like a benefit is that I think that theater will now be more accessible with the opening of minds to this digital platform. Theater was not a very accessible medium. It's really expensive. You have to travel to certain places, and that's why we dream so big. I think as theater artists and practitioners and creatives and creators as a whole, you have to dream huge, massively. And I think this pandemic has actually opened up the possibility of more, of educating and reaching communities that it hasn't had the opportunity to reach. And I always wanted to be an artist, especially a theater artist, because I wanted to change lives through storytelling. And I think this way that we are moving, how we are moving, it is opening us up to so many more lives to touch and hearts to touch. And theater, unlike film, I think, shows the experience of what is going on now in the world. Writers write for the now. And when that is able to be consumed easier and more openly, I think that globally as people and human beings, we're not just connected, but we can start to notice what is needed and make those changes, maybe not, communally at first, but definitely internally. you can't see something enough times without having to question it, hopefully. And then when those questions start to take place, hopefully you question those things in your life. And then you start to make those changes for the better. And I think theater does give us that. So with the welcoming of a live audience, I think, yes, we get that again. But also I think it is quite nice to be able to show that to more people. And I'm really, really excited because I think Elaine is right. These thoughts are not being had of how to reach more people, how to move theater on a digital platform, how to make it more accessible. It was not being had. It was a very, very humdrum, I don't know if that's the right terminology, actually. Let's just say high society kind of thing. And so I know that people may be nervous and, you know, I get it. If you don't want to be vaccinated or you feel very frightened, it is a very frightening thing, but art is here to love you and care for you. And I just really hope people know that. And when they are ready, they have a place with us always.
It's such an inspiring thought, and it's certainly why I became both an artist and an arts executive, that I deeply believe in the power of storytelling as a tool for change. We've seen it work over thousands of years, that art and storytelling change our societies for the better and reflect on that. And, you know, it makes me think, Yemi, a little bit about, you know, World City is a global forum for urban innovation, right? And a lot of what you're talking about is the idea that we can innovate in this art form and move forward. So Cheryl, can I just ask you maybe to respond to some of the things that Yemi was talking about, and what our assembled viewers today should consider as they innovate in urban environments to make sure that arts culture thrives, because we know that arts culture makes communities thrive.
I actually think what Elaine and Yemi were both saying is really significant for all innovators in urban environments, in that include us, right? Like our reach can be really far. And if there are ideas on how to, because the bottom line is that unless we start curating wider and bigger audiences, whether it's on streaming, whether it's, if it's live streamed or whether it's recorded or whatever it is, it will only, as Yemi said, get the stories out there, right? And get the stories to reach all sorts of communities. That theater, over the years before the pandemic hit, became a very elitist, attended art form. So I would say if there's any cross-pollination that we could do with anyone, invite us. I also think that, I think Elaine can probably speak to this the best over in the UK, where I think it's a little easier. I don't know, but, well, no, I do know. We have 14 unions on Broadway. We have to negotiate with 14 unions on Broadway. And streaming and making it accessible to audiences is a very, very complicated and sometimes bang your head up against the wall process. So therefore, if other businesses and corporations and thought leaders would use and include the way that we tell stories in theater or in dance or in concerts or in anything like that, I think it's not only just theater people or dance people or concert people saying we're going to stream our stuff, but how do we cross-pollinate storytelling with creating an urban environment that can have a really, really, I would love to know what's going on in London all the time. I mean, I think that, the National Theatre Live was just a great thing. I'm at a loss for words. It was a great innovation for us. And so that's what I would say. I would say invite us, take our phone calls, take our emails, and also support the arts, because I think the arts do cross-pollinate with business and do cross-pollinate with tech, and we tell the stories. We're the ones who tell the stories.
I agree 100%. And so, Elaine, I will come to you with this question, but I also, as the other arts executive on the panel, I just want to lift up how fragile and complicated these conversations are for institutions. How the arts funding model around the world was fragile prior to the pandemic. And now these innovations require new kinds of thinking that sometimes run counter to what we did even just a few years ago. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Cheryl was saying.
Yeah, I mean, look, we should also be clear, we're not out of the woods in the UK, certainly not in London and certainly not at South Bank Centre. Our government provided 1.57 billion for the arts, which was a fantastic gesture. They did it very relatively early on in last year, so that we knew that there was the potential of rescue funding. We at South Bank Centre got a loan, which we have to pay back, and we're on a very, very clear timetable for that. It is taxpayers' money. And so far, audiences are volatile. I mean, audiences to the physical spaces. They're coming back to the familiar. They're finding new work, or work that might be unfamiliar, or work that maybe isn't uplifting at the moment. It doesn't seem to be shifting the same number of tickets. And I don't know if that's global, but it's certainly the case across London. So those are worrying signs, and you know, it's early days yet, but I would say we're definitely not out of the woods. I think, you know, South Bank Centre has this really interesting history. So it's the only legacy of the 1951 Festival of Britain. And the Festival of Britain was something that a Labour government decided to do after the Second World War, when London was bombed out, particularly the bit of South London that we sit in. And what they decided to spend money on was not, at that very moment, housing or education or providing jobs. They had a festival of the arts, and it was across the country. And it was a festival that celebrated innovation and arts and science and culture and music, because they believed that would heal the nation more quickly than anything else. And that is, I always say to everybody that I speak to about South Bank Centre, it's sort of built into our bricks and mortar, that ideology, that notion that what we do makes society feel better about themselves. It's kind of, it is a kind of balm. And so it's an ideology that powers South Bank Centre. So we're not actually, within reason, an elitist organisation. Over 40% of what we do is free, unticketed, because we so completely believe in that accessibility and inclusivity notion. We open at 10 o'clock. We open our doors at 10 o'clock every morning. We close at 11 o'clock at night, and anybody can come in to those spaces, as I said at the beginning, and use our spaces. And hopefully, as they sit there, whatever they've intended to come in and do, they'll bump into some art or some culture along the way. But I do think the protection of that civic space, the space that people can kind of come and be together, which is the one thing we weren't able to do last year, was be together in public spaces. I do think preserving that public space, even while we're developing the digital platforms and thinking about the online reach, I do think that has to be weighed up alongside it and valued just as greatly.
Elaine, the things you're saying about our ability to be civic space and community space are ideas in America that are really new, conversations we've only been having in the last few years. And I think it's really exciting. It's one of the most exciting innovations in thought about how we can be a part of our communities. Yemi, I'd love to bring you in that thought, because I think you've already discussed some of the innovations you're seeing. I'm curious how it feels to be involved in that. As an arts producer who produced online last year, I had a certain role to play. But as a performer, you are on the other side of the camera trying to do the thing that was live in a new way. How are you experiencing these early calls for community space and innovation? How is it affecting your work and your artistry?
Honestly, I feel like I'm going through like an evolution, because I think that I never even thought, honestly, I wasn't like out there going to be like, I want to be a movie star. Now I'm like, oh my God, I'm on a billboard. No, I'm not, but I'm on a TV show. So that's quite nice. And it's really made me sink into the humanity of me and change my craft to not like fit into something, but to expand it, to call on different aspects of myself and to expand those aspects and get to know myself a little bit more, which has opened up vulnerability. And I think I'm able to be more honest and true in my art and in my work and also my person. And I think those are the benefits of it all. Elaine, I think you're absolutely fantastic. Like, oh my gosh, you're a star. Everything that you said is beautiful because it is needed. Those spaces are needed. Art education is going to change the world. And I hope that if there's like any producers or people with the big money, millionaires out there, billionaires, Jeff Bezos, call us and fund art education, because having these communal spaces for not just children, but adults to find and discover new aspects of themselves, it's going to, yes, change lives, but also change the world, because we don't change the world by doing these huge, massive things. We change the world by doing little, tiny, small things that make up the big things. So as an artist, as I started to really look within myself and see all the things that weren't working for me and I was just doing to perform or to fit a mold, and figuring out, why am I doing all these things to fit a mold if I'm not happy? I'm changing the little things to make me happy each and every single day. So when I see a script, or when I get an audition, or when I'm in the room or in front of an audience, it's no longer for consumption, it's about healing. And as an artist, I made a mission statement. My mission statement is to heal Black people and myself and expand our humanity and let that be shown brightly. And that has changed how I work so much so. And I really do believe a lot of other artists and creators and creatives have done much of the same. And if you haven't, once again, we are here waiting for you, calling you in with love.
Yes, I think that evolution you're speaking of is sort of the point, right? And to call people into partnership with the arts communities is truly important, because, you know, over the last, I mean, it's been decades that scientists and social researchers have overwhelmingly found data that the arts are essential to healthy and prosperous societies. You know, they are the bedrock of civilization and a leading indicator of our environment's future stability. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I'll just open up and say final thoughts. Is there anything the panel would like to leave our guests with?
I want to say that what Elaine and Yemi were saying, and the importance of communal space for artists is something that we, as Gabriel said, we do not have in, at least in the New York metropolitan area, all that much. And I think that in order to be the best artists we can be, and as Yemi was saying, the best people and the most authentic people, to be able to congregate and form community. That's you know, you talk, Elaine, about post-World War II and creating a festival to heal and to uplift and to, I find that, I just want to say, anyone who's out there who also has space that they want to make available to artists to sit and hang out, and as Yemi said, like just a cup of coffee, talking about who we are and what we're working on. And we were so starved of that during the pandemic. We were so starved of that, and I believe that for the most part in the U.S. we're starved of that completely. I mean, there's a couple of spaces that you can do that in, but not really. You know, the Signature Theater Center has a great space that you can hang out in, but nothing like all the spaces I've seen in London and what you do, Elaine. And I want to say that community conversation. Uta Hagen once, in her book, very famously said that acting is 95% listening. And we need to create the space for us to listen to each other. And that's what's going to heal us. And so, that's my final thought.
Great, Cheryl. And with that, we are exactly out of time. Cheryl, Yemi, Elaine, thank you so much for being here. And for those of you watching, please visit our websites. Please join us in this conversation and partnership. If the show is going to go on, it has to involve you as well. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Thanks, Gabriel.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Cheryl and Elaine. It was so lovely to meet you.
So nice to meet you all.
Very nice to meet you.
I don't know how to shut this off.
Yay! Maybe they were like, they were so good.
You don't want us to go.
Thank you, everyone. I think we hang on for a few seconds more to speak to our